Hello, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Can you confirm we are live? Good evening and welcome to the rabbit hole, everyone. It's great to have Randall Carlson and Mr. Luke Caverns on this week. We
Yes,
were
thank you for
having
inviting
Luke,
me.
and then we heard that Randall and Luke had such a wonderful conversation. Where was that recently? I should know. But didn't
Um,
you two bounce off each other recently?
well, we had a phone
Oh,
conversation.
it's phone
Yeah,
conversations. Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. At
Well, we were
some
trying to
point,
make some of those live. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. At some point, I need to Randall and I need to rendezvous in person. But yeah, I gave him a call. I still have a day job,
Yeah.
so I take care of seals and sea lions on the weekends. And so I was
Okay.
on
Didn't
my
know that. I
Yeah,
didn't.
I was on my break, and I call Randall. He calls me back while I'm at the seal and sea lion pool. So for about 40 minutes, he's hearing the incessant barking of seals and sea lions coming through the phone while we're trying to talk about important stuff.
I knew you worked on the weekends, and I had no idea it was with aquatic mammals.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I've got to
yeah.
hear more about that. But let me introduce y'all just very briefly for anybody that doesn't know them. Randall and Luke were fantastic speakers in June at the Cosmic Summit 2023 and are going to be joining us again at the Cosmic Summit 2024. And as folks know, Randall Carlson is a polymathematical geometrician and interesting sage to all. And Luke Caverns is an anthropology student in Texas who has become very, very popular as a science communicator and ancient history communicator. So we've kind of got two poles here. We've got one of the old line most popular people in the Cosmic Summit subject set, Mr. Carlson. And then we've got kind of a new arrival to the subjects and an explosive new force on the internet, Mr. Luke Caverns, right? So we've got the full generational train here with me somewhere in the middle, right? And Luke specializes in Mesoamerican history, particularly the history of the Mayans, and is very open minded, I guess you would say, and curious, and is willing to look at things a little bit differently than perhaps some of the mainstream is, but he's also a mainstream guy. And Randall has a lot of Mayan knowledge himself, and I'm going to let some of that flow and talk, but let's also just shoot the shit because this is an informal forum that we have here at the Rabbit Hole. And I just want to thank you guys for coming on and thank you for your patience as we set up the broadcast. Yeah.
Well,
Luke,
oh,
yeah, go ahead, Randall.
well, going forward, I have one question, George. Was wondering about what species are we talking about? A domestic rabbit here? Uh, is this cottontail by any chance? I'm just
Or a jackalope, like one of those things. I was,
now.
yeah,
There's been an ongoing controversy over Cosmographia with the Snake Brothers
yeah.
because I claim to have seen a jackalope, and they're insisting or implying that such a thing is a total fantasy and doesn't exist.
Well,
But I will say I saw something in
yeah,
the San Luis Valley, foothills of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, late at night, coming home from an observatory. I don't remember what stars we were looking at, but that damn thing crossed the road in front of us as we're heading up into the hills, and I swear to God,
really.
I thought it was a jackalope, whatever it was. If it was a bunny rabbit, it was the biggest damn rabbit I've ever seen. It was the
Maybe,
size of, it was about the size of Luke's dog, I think, if I could.
maybe it was
Link,
just a run of the mill chupacabra, right?
Yeah.
well, it was on all fours. It was on
Yeah.
all fours. Ran right across the road in the headlights, and I said, "What the hell was that?" And it looked to me like a 4 foot long, 2 foot high rabbit. But
Now,
I thought, well,
Randall, I gotta ask,
that must be the mythical jackalope I've heard
yeah.
about. I didn't think they were real. Anyhow,
Well,
that's enough of that. It's a true story, but that's all I'm going to say.
was
about
that in modern times or back in the early 70s, Randall?
it.
Okay.
It was actually 1989.
1989? Okay, so that's neither nor. That was just,
That's
yeah.
neither nor. That's right betwixt and between.
That might have been probably around when the jackalope finally went extinct. We'd taken so much of its habitat that the jackalope could no longer march
Could be.
forth
Could
doing its
be.
thing.
Could be, but
Hey, Luke,
unless
since
there's
you
a
might be a little newer to people, not the people who came to Cosmic Summit, but we are putting this thing out on Apple Podcasts and whatnot.
Oh,
Um,
great.
yeah, tell us a little bit about your studies, where you're heading with things, your tour coming up. I know
Yep.
that's usually at the end of a podcast, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a promo in advance.
Yeah,
Tell
yeah.
us
Well,
about.
thank you. So, no longer an anthropology student. I graduated.
Oh, you did. I'm sorry, man.
No,
I
no,
knew it
no,
was
no. I
booked.
graduated. I graduated. That was a big 3 weeks. So we had the Cosmic Summit. Then I got married. Then
Yeah,
I graduated from university. So,
I did
anyways,
not know that.
um,
Congratulations, man.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I officially have a title that they say makes me worthy to talk about the things that I talk about. Even though of everything I learned in school, none of it has anything to do with what I actually do. But I'm kind of a rogue anthropologist. I'm never actually
Now,
going to
is that
go.
entirely true? Like the stuff that interests you, how much overlap is that with the classroom teaching? I mean,
Oh,
I'm sure it
yeah,
all
yeah,
interests you,
yeah.
but
It's
the
an
things that especially
exaggeration.
interest
It's an exaggeration. Yeah, I mean,
you.
I studied ancient Egypt, I studied Mesoamerica, ancient China,
Yeah,
the Middle East, North, Central, and South America, of course. I studied basically the whole planet.
yeah,
Different, really just the history of the whole world, but nothing really that in depth. Like when I studied Mesoamerica, South America, and Egypt, I knew more than the coursework actually provided. So
oh, did you?
I didn't even study for those classes. But no, I mean, you learn the scientific method. You learn, how to be an archaeologist and an anthropologist. It didn't go overly in detail for archaeology, but I did take archaeology classes. Most of it was anthropology, and I learned a lot.
Yeah,
And kind of got a different. I think the approach I'm trying to take, and you guys will see this when my episode on the concrete podcast comes out. I kind of get into this a little bit.
yeah.
Um, we talk about just very briefly about ancient Egypt. And I pretty much tell him I'm like, well, I have a degree in anthropology, so I am, I guess, kind of an academic. And I told him I was like, one thing you have to understand is when people talk about the mainstream, when they talk about these bad archaeologists that are withholding information from people, I was like, that certainly does happen. And in Egypt, that is definitely the case sometimes. Like the Ministry of Antiquities is definitely questionable, right? And
Hmm.
I was saying, but you got to realize of all the academic and archaeological conclusions that Egyptologists make about Egypt, only a smidget of all of that does anybody dispute anything with. It has to do
Hmm.
with the beginning of the Old Kingdom and some of pre-dynastic Egypt. Everything else in the Old Kingdom, like after the time
Hmm.
that Menkaure would have existed, all the way down through Cleopatra, nobody disputes any of that. So there's little hairs and little bones that people have to pick with, I
What an
guess,
excellent
the
insight.
academic world. And
Yeah.
so and so I try to establish that. And so I'm kind of this cross where I'm a skeptic. I love diving into what people call fringe, but
Hmm.
I'm also an academic as well. And I my mentor is as academic as they come. He
Hmm.
doesn't. Dr. Ed Barnhart, he won't even listen to a second of anybody talking about the Sphinx it might be older, whatever. That's
Hmm.
fine. He's a great guy, but he's an academic through and through, and I'm kind of somewhere in this middle ground.
That can be a
Um,
hard thing to bridge. Did you ever feel an awkwardness with it, or did it just happen to come together well for you? Kind of like Mark
um,
Young in Australia, our friend Mark,
yeah, yeah, of course,
that
yeah,
he kind of had the same experience where he was into a lot of things that weren't necessarily being taught in the classroom.
yeah. So I guess maybe I would have had that run in, but in the classes that I would have been able to express the way I feel, like let's talk about ancient Egypt. I studied ancient Egypt online. So I didn't
Hmm.
actually go into a classroom and speak to a professor. I never spoke to anybody about ancient Egypt. I just studied it.
Hmm.
Now some of my hands-on classes were in class, but that's about a completely different topic, and I wouldn't discuss any of my interests with that professor. Um, but let's say with Dr. Barnhart, who he's an academic through and through, but he's a New World archaeologist, so he only studies in North, Central, and South America.
Hmm.
And if I were to talk to him, which I've never actually had this conversation with him, but if I were to talk to him about some of the enigmatic sites that are in, like they can be found in Andean cultures, so these giant megalithic stones that can be found in Inca sites like Machu Picchu, Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, Cusco. If I were to talk to him about these sites, well, he would say, no, 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 those don't belong to a civilization that lived 12,500 years ago. That is the Inca standing on top of shoulders of giants of a 5,000-year-old culture that had been growing into this point where the Inca were now finally able to build something like that. The problem is, there's not a lot of evidence for that either. So what I do is I try to take, since the best example I give this on Concrete as well, or on Danny Jones' podcast. I say, I love the idea of studying a lost Atlantean culture or civilization just as much as I love studying ancient Egypt and Orthodox Egyptology. I love them both equally. So I try to take an approach that's completely unbiased. And so that kind of leaves me in this weird place where I study the Great Pyramids, and I don't think that the pyramids are the best example of a lost Atlantean civilization as some other sites in ancient Egypt would be, or the Sphinx would be. So I end up in the weird middle ground. But I just try to be honest and unbiased. So that's a very long-winded answer, but that's kind of where I'm at. I'm an anthropologist that studies the origins of civilizations and some of the gray areas, and I try to highlight the gray areas and get people interested in it.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. And I got some follow-up questions kind of about where you are on some of this stuff, but I want to give Randall a chance.
Yeah, absolutely.
To just tell us, we often hear him on, we'll discuss a lot of ancient subjects, right? Including the Maya. But where do you come from on the Maya, and what piques your interest, Randall?
I would say a couple of things. Their architecture, their systems of irrigation, their symbology and mythology, of course. Those would be the primary things that I've addressed my attention to in the last 10 or 20 years, I guess. The geology of the region and how they interacted with that, particularly the cenotes and their concepts of catastrophism and cyclical world ages, I find very compelling, very sophisticated. And I want to add that I like Luke's approach. The balancing act is, to me, is that without getting too far to one side or the other, you can get too academically constrained within the prevailing narratives, or on the other end of the spectrum, you can get way out there and start believing things that cannot be substantiated or have very little actual real evidence for them. And the balancing act is finding that midpoint where you're simultaneously skeptical and open-minded.
That's right. Where you're wondering about the high mathematics, but you don't believe that the glyph is actually of an ancient astronaut.
Necessarily.
You know what I mean?
Right. But if you can present to me some extraordinary evidence, hell yeah, I'll consider anything. But I got to see the evidence. And just in quick reference to one thing, the comment that Luke dropped about his professor was not accepting the idea of the Sphinx being older or Egyptian civilization being older. I don't remember if it was specifically towards the Sphinx or the broader civilization. The interesting thing about this, and I do have a geological background. I'm not a professional geologist, but I've been studying geology for 40 years, and I do know a thing or two about rock weathering. And I think that it is unambiguously the imprint of water weathering on the Sphinx and on the Sphinx ditch. A substantial amount of water. So, but then from there, what do we extrapolate from that? Do we extrapolate then that it has to be 12,000, 13,000 years old? We do know that there was much more rainfall in Egypt at that time. And we even know into the early Holocene.
I was about to say, for another 5,000 years, it was an entirely different climate.
So are we looking at, now the Sphinx is right at the bedrock. The top of the Sphinx ditch is about 105 feet above sea level, which is just pretty much the same as where the Nile River is at. If it was water, it means that water had to have been up at that level at some point. Now, there's two options for that. The Nile River rose, and we do know that there was very substantial flooding of the Nile River during that transitionary phase. We know that from several
Yeah, they call it the Wild Nile phase.
The Wild Nile phase. That's exactly right. Exactly. And there are sapropylitic layers off the coast of the Nile Delta on the eastern Mediterranean that were formed by a major influx of sediment-laden fresh water with a lot of organic material in it. A denser flow than the water that was there, so it sinks to the bottom, and it's anoxic because one of the things that happens is that the fresh water wants to form a lid on top of the salt water, which then interrupts the thermohaline convection loop, which is bringing oxygen to the bottom. So at the same time that fresh water is coming in over the surface of the Nile, it's dumping its sediment layer. Because if you've got a flash, like say large-scale flash floods coming down the Nile Valley, they are going to necessarily pick up a lot of sediment and train that sediment, deposit it off the coast there in the Mediterranean. So there's a succession of sapropylitic layers that are evidence of those wild Niles that you were talking about. Now, here's the thing. So we're faced with a couple of conclusions. One, the water of the Nile rose up high enough to submerge the Sphinx, or you actually had surface runoff coming from the uplands to the east. I'm sorry, to the west. The Giza Plateau is on the west side of the Nile, and I think if you go, if you go to the west, you're climbing in elevation. So if you had torrential rains over that area, that arid zone to the west of Cairo, and over probably even into Libya, then there could be a tremendous amount of surface runoff. And that surface runoff is going to drain to the east right into the Nile Valley. But now here's the question. Even if we acknowledge that it's water erosion on the Sphinx, what does that tell us about timing? Okay, are we looking at a few singular events of extraordinary magnitude, or are we looking at a more prolonged period of erosion, lesser flows, or maybe a small succession of pulses? But if it's not evidence of an older, like an 11 or 12 or 13,000-year-old minimum Sphinx, then the implication is that there have been major floods, say within the last 5,000 years, constrained by the conventional chronologies of Egyptology, right? It would mean that there were very significant floods within that time frame. Which is it? I don't know. I would lean towards 11, 12, 13,000 years ago. I would lean in that window when the geologists have recognized the wild Niles, which is pretty much dated around 12,000 years ago, and overflow in the headwaters, of both the Blue and the White Nile. That was where these floods are originating.
I was going to say, here's another thing to consider. So the dream stela that's laid between the paws of the Sphinx?
Yeah.
Well, I want to say about 100 years after that. So I want to say this is roughly about 1400 BC. It's been 6 months since I've looked into the exact details of this. But that dream stela was placed there about 1,000 years after the reign of Khafre, which is who they say constructed the Sphinx, right? So the dream stela is put there in about 1500 BC. By about 1400 BC, it's known that the Egyptians, because they were trying to repair the Sphinx. I mean, you can see the repair work that's being done. So about 1100 years later, they purposely buried the Sphinx in the pit that it's in. They completely covered it up because they couldn't, I guess the state of it was dwindling over time. So they purposely buried it to preserve it. So what Egyptologists, without outright saying it, want you to believe, if you look into it, is that all of that weather erosion happened in 1100 years. It's not that it happened. Yeah, because the original idea, when you don't know that it was buried, you give it the idea of like, okay, well then maybe all that erosion happened from the time of 2500 BC when Khafre was alive, all the way until Napoleon arrived at the Sphinx, and then they started digging it up. So what is that? 4,500 years, almost
Mhm.
4,200 years. So for 4,200 years, but it's not 4,200 years. It's 1,100 years.
Do you know how they came to believe that the Sphinx was deliberately buried? I was unaware of that. I just thought it was the sands of time, literally.
No, man, it's been 6 months. I should
Yeah,
go back. I want to do a video over this.
yeah.
But I actually have it in a video, but I need to go back and make another one. But yes, there was a pharaoh who launched an expedition from Hierakonpolis, I believe, and he went down to Memphis and then to Giza, and then he visited the pyramids, and then he deemed that the Sphinx needed to be buried to protect it, and
Did
so
not know
and so
that.
they purposely buried this. This is around 1400 BC, I believe, maybe
Yeah,
1300.
yeah.
So the Egyptians buried it, and so yeah, I mean it would have had to happen in that 11 to 1200 year time period rather than 4,500 years like we would traditionally think. So
Hmm.
how likely is it that all of that erosion happened over the course of just 1,000 years? Not very likely.
Yeah, and those processes aren't underway right now, right?
No, no.
I mean, and if they were underway right now, that just extends the amount of time that you have to allow for it to have occurred. If you're talking
Yeah.
about the one or two, well, I don't think any storms. I guess you
Well,
do have stormwater events on the Giza Plateau, but a couple of times a year, Randall?
well, a flow. It depends on the flow regime, and you've
Hmm.
got obviously right now you're looking at an arid environment with minimal rainfall and minimal surface runoff.
Hmm.
Okay, but my point was in times past, and when there was probably torrential rainfall over. Now, another possibility is tsunamis. I don't know if that evidence exists so much in the Western Mediterranean, but in the Eastern Mediterranean, but in the Western
Hmm.
Mediterranean, there's very substantial evidence for major tsunamis. In some cases, they had run-up heights of 140 and more feet. And this is really like within historical
Hold
times.
on, you guys are teaching me things, and I'm supposed to know it all. Now, hold on. There is evidence in the Western Med of high run-up tsunamis. I've seen that
Oh
evidence
yeah,
in Greece where there've been,
yeah,
interesting
yeah,
tsunami. Yeah, but not quite that dramatic. I had no idea. I'm going to look that up. I'm a tsunami geek
yeah.
amongst
Look up
other geeky things.
tsunamis
Yeah,
on the Balearic Islands off the east coast of Spain.
really?
Yes,
Huh.
yes.
I have to look
Okay,
at.
so let me finish my point.
Go ahead, sir.
Good.
Yes.
Okay, so you could certainly produce that degree of erosion actually in much less than 1,000 years. It all
Hmm.
depends on the duration of the flow, the velocity of the flow, the shear forces, the abrasiveness of the flow. All of
Hmm.
these things can affect the rate of erosion. Now, this is all limestone here. We're looking at limestone terrain. So if these waters are acidic, okay, that's going to accelerate the rate of erosion.
Hmm.
So again, it comes down to, I think in my mind, what's unambiguous is that it is water erosion, not wind erosion.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, then the question becomes, when are we talking about? What is the epoch of this erosion?
Yep.
And is it a single event or multiple events? Because what we're seeing now, like George said, we're not seeing the formation of that undulating profile now. We're
Hmm.
seeing erosion, and some of that has been cited by the critics, but this is more mechanical erosion uh, caused by, for example, the proximity of a major road that's got loaded trucks on it, causing
Hmm.
ground vibrations, and it has nothing
Hmm.
to do with an
Hmm.
accelerated water erosion.
Hmm.
So again, the question is there evidence, and it would probably take field studies to show that there were sheet floods, large-scale sheet floods coming from the west? And if so, did they submerge? They would have. They would have submerged the Sphinx. They would have submerged the Giza
Yeah.
Plateau, or was it a rising Nile?
Hmm.
To submerge the Sphinx right now, it would have to reach about 110 feet above sea level or
Hmm.
above the current level of the Nile. would submerge the Sphinx. Okay. However, a submergence, it all depends again on the velocity of the water. If you've got a rapidly moving sort of sheet flood, a flash flood, and then variables become the competency to entrain sediment. And then there's saturation where a water flow will pick up all the sediment it can pick up, and then it doesn't pick up anymore because it's overloaded already. So there's a lot of questions about that, which to me are being ignored or being neglected because of the prevailing academic views on what may or may not have been possible on historically there in that region on the Giza Plateau. To me, there are clear-cut questions that are raised by that erosion that Schwaller de Lubitsch was the very first one to point that out. John Anthony West picked up on that reference to the erosion of the Sphinx from reading Schwaller de Lubitsch, and then Robert Schoch, of course, was brought in by John Anthony West.
Hold on, let me put a peg down there. We are about to send out an invite from the Cosmic Summit to Mr. Robert Schoch.
Good.
To come next year, right? And as you guys know, I've been consumed by a sudden project over the last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has suffered has been inviting the additional speakers. That said, just to put in another plug, tickets are on sale for the Cosmic Summit 2024, June 15th and 16th of next year. For people that didn't know, and we're going to be adding exciting new speakers, in coming weeks, and Schoch's at literally the top of my list from PhDs.
Yep.
And I've even drafted the email. So here I am, a procrastinator trying to explain myself. But we're going to invite Schoch. I hope he can make it, and other PhDs that have controversial.
Yeah, and you do know, of course, that Schoch, unless he's changed his views, he was pretty much dismissive of the impact hypothesis.
Yeah, and that's fine.
That's fine, of course.
Yeah, we take all.
He's got some good work on the Sphinx.
Yeah. Well, I've met Robert. I remember meeting him out at Arklantis. Remember Arklantis, Randall? Yeah, kind of a predecessor to the Cosmic Summit.
Yeah, Graham was there. Graham Hancock was there.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a fun weekend, and I hope he can make it. And the solar hypothesis is absolutely worth everyone's attention. And I tell you, solar outbursts personally disturb me more as a global threat for me and my children and my grandchildren's lifetimes, much more than comet disintegration does. Even though comet disintegration is kind of the cosmic tusk, my blog's thing, right? But I am not at all unaware of the horrors that can be wreaked by solar outbursts. But Schoch and those, the Electric Universe people, they haven't provided the forensic evidence that the YD team has, right? I mean, we've got more than 50 papers with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of lab time and pages of data. And then the solar, and I'm not trying to be an academic snob, but there's a little something to it. They need to get something in the literature.
And my point of view, my perspective on it is that the evidence for an impact, which is now very robust, does not negate or deny the possibility of a solar event that could have been catastrophic.
Yeah, I've got to talk to.
I think that in the complexity of our existence in this universe that we're just learning about, we have to consider that there's a lot of forces that we might have to contend with in the long term as a evolving civilization, both in the future and in our past.
Hey, let's pivot a little bit. Luke, who the hell were the Olmecs?
The Olmec.
Make it short. Authoritative, please.
So the Olmecs, that is one of our, it's definitely the first and oldest civilization, an actual defined civilization in Mesoamerica. But what's interesting about them is they're probably not the very first civilization in Mesoamerica, because they arrive similar in some ways to the ancient Egyptians. They arrive on the archaeological scene as a fully formed civilization with a fully understood concept of religion, divine kingship, ability to it's actually more extreme than ancient Egypt, to be honest. from the very beginning, they're able to perfectly achieve what they intend to achieve, I suppose, or they're able to perfectly achieve the height of their civilization. So these massive basalt monuments that come from the Veracruz volcanic belt,
Hmm.
they're able to quarry these boulders and move them 50 to 75 miles to either La Venta, San Lorenzo, or Tres Zapotes, which are their three
Hmm.
capital cities. And they think that they may have found another one in Guatemala or near Guatemala called Aguada Phoenix. If you guys have ever heard of that, it's like a mile-long
Mm-mm.
structure. It's a mile-long raised structure that was found, I think, in western Guatemala or right across the border in Mexico. It is the oldest giant Mesoamerican site that's ever been discovered.
Hmm.
It's way out in the middle of the jungle, and I don't know that anybody has actually been there on foot yet. This was
You're
discovered
kidding.
about a year
You're
ago.
kidding.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're able to
How
find.
was it attributed to Olmecs? And what were the Olmecs' architecture? And
Yeah, so Olmecs are probably connected to North American, and I mean, you see some of this in South America too. I'm sure that there is a connection, even though it can't be proven, to North, Central, and South America of the ancient people. Um, but the Olmecs, they were building mounds, just like
okay.
people in North America were. They were building huge earthen structures, whereas the Maya worked basically just in stone. The Maya didn't really create mounds. And so this site of Aguada Phoenix is not a stone structure; it's an earthen structure, but it's like massive, way beyond anything Olmec that's been found. But they just attribute it to the Olmec, but it's much further east than we thought that the Olmecs went into basically the Maya territory, like the Yucatan Peninsula. So the Olmecs, are uh, have a fully fledged concept of their religion, have a fully fledged concept of royalty, of divine kingship. They have they're building pyramids, they're building temples, they're constructing tombs and burying their dead. They had their own writing system. They very likely had their own calendar. They have their own numerology system. And they would have started probably around
Yeah, I was
they
about
would have
to.
started probably around 2000 BC up until about 300 BC.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Are the
there's
heads
a lot of
found in
mystery.
association with the mounds? And I was trying
Yes,
to.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They're found in the same places.
They
So
are.
the Olmec heads, they range anywhere from about 6 tons to 42 tons. So I think the head that weighs 6 tons, I think they call it Monument 4 or Monument 7, and then the head that weighs 42 tons is called the La Cobada head. And what's interesting about this is Dr. Barnhart's looked into this. This is one of the things that I love about him. He's not a guy that will shy away from from a mystery. He doesn't brush it off.
Hmm.
A lot of academics do. And so in his podcast, it's Archaeoed. He has an episode that's just called The Olmecs. About 7 minutes in, I know this just because I made this video recently, but about 7 minutes in, he says he traveled with a nautical engineer down into the jungles of Veracruz. And this guy was so fascinated with how they would have moved these heads. Because keep in mind, so they're moving it from the Veracruz volcanic belt. It's basalt or basalt. And so they're having to move it through jungle, swamps, rivers, and over mountain ranges to get to where they would have eventually gone. As the crow flies, they would have had to go through all these obstacles. So they did not we know that they did not use the wheel to transport their objects, even though they did have knowledge of the wheel because we have children's
Toys.
toys. Yeah, so
Yeah.
the toy that's like it's like an animal, and
Yeah.
at its heels are wheels and you can roll it back and forth.
Yeah.
That doesn't come from the old world, that comes from the new world. So ancient Central and South Americans made those children's toys. So they had knowledge of the wheel.
But hold on, they were also Middle Eastern children's toys, right?
Oh, maybe they were. Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
I'm
No,
wrong.
no, no. But it does. I know that that's a fact in Central America that they had toy wheels, but we're not using them to move the large things that they were moving, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, cause so it's like a common thing that people say. Well, they didn't have knowledge of the wheel, and look at all the stuff that they did. Well, what's weird, what's even weirder is no, they actually did have knowledge of the wheel and chose not to use it. So now look at all the stuff that they did. It's really hard to understand. So this nautical engineer, he's fascinated by, well, how did they move this? And so archaeologists like Ina typically says, oh, well, they used balsa river rafts. So balsa wood is common around there. And so what he did was he went home and he created a software. It's like a grid where you can implement your hypothetical the weight and size of your hypothetical Olmec head, and then you can create your own hypothetical balsa river raft. And so what he ended up finding was that if you made the raft bigger than the river, and it was too long, too wide to actually sail down the river. If you made it bigger than the river and you put a 5-ton Olmec head on it,
Just
it
a
would,
5-tonner.
yeah, a 5-ton, it would sink the raft. The smallest head is 6 tons. The largest one is 42 tons. So even a the 6-ton head would sink a raft that's bigger than the river. And so
Randall, have you ever heard that? That's pretty interesting, man.
No, not specifically that, but I was aware of the fact, not knowing the exact numbers, but I was aware of the fact that the heads, the basalt heads, were very heavy.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're enormous.
And raised that same question that we keep encountering over and over again about, how are these tremendous weights being transported?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I,
no,
I,
it.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say it's almost exactly the same. The Olmecs are, in a lot of ways, almost exactly the same mystery as the Egyptians. They arrive almost out of nowhere. They peak almost instantly from the very beginning of their civilization. Even if you look at what they say about Orthodox Egypt, where let's say we really start getting started around the time of Djoser and Imhotep, right? So that's 2650 BC. Well, almost immediately from Djoser, you have Senefru, and then you have Khufu's Great Pyramid. It's boom, they're already there
Yeah.
at the very beginning, and then it
They
declines.
arrive fully formed. Yeah.
The Olmecs are exactly the same, and they both started along a river. I think it's like the Sierra de la Tuxtla rivers, something like that. There's 2 rivers, and that the Olmecs are around, and so they harvest maize there. They're the ones that cultivated maize, so they get all this power. Anyways, they're able to learn how to move these massive stones. And what's even more interesting, what I should also say, is that 42-ton stone was a lot heavier when they moved it, because we know that all of their sites were carved, or I'm sorry, all of their monuments were carved on the site in the place that they stood. Because I've been to some of these sites, and when you're looking at like an altar, you look on the jungle floor. Oh, there's the piece that they chipped off the side of it
Yeah.
to make this altar. It's still laying on the ground 4,000 years later, 3,000 years later. And so think about, if there's one altar 33, I think, and or maybe it's monument 33, altar 7, something like that. And so this thing weighs 33 tons, but there's a lip on the top of the altar that somebody would have sat on top of, that they think maybe these were like thrones or something. And
Yeah.
so that cavity where that would have filled in that space, it's estimated that the weight of it would have been another 40 plus ton monument. And so they carve all this stuff on site. There's absolutely no explanation as to how any of it was moved whatsoever. So it's almost the same mystery of, how did the Egyptians move the red granite from Aswan up into the king's chamber?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's exactly the same mystery, and it's inexplicable. There's no explanation for it.
So, Luke, they would cut the blocks, they would quarry the blocks, they would transport them to the site, then they would carve the heads at the site. I got the picture correct? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so it's amazing, and almost never again in Mesoamerica do we see that happen again. There are some heads that very few people know about. They're called the papil heads, but they come out of nowhere in Guatemala, quite far away on the southern coast of Guatemala, just up in the mountains from the ocean. And so But almost never again in Mesoamerica do we see these giant megalithic stone monuments being transported these long distances. However, I've been talking to Dr. Barnhart about this. Some of the oldest Maya sites that we don't have photos of, that people haven't really walked out there. So I should say that somewhere deep in the Petén region, which the Petén really spans over into the Yucatan, Campeche, and Belize, right? So I'm just talking about that jungle that's in the center of the Yucatan Peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
If you're talking in ancient terms, without the borders of current countries, right? Somewhere deep in that jungle is the origins of Maya civilization. It probably has some connection to the Olmecs, although it can't be 100% proven. We just see some cultural similarities, but there's not like a direct connection that we have. But somewhere deep in those jungles is the Fertile Crescent of the Maya world. Somewhere it began. And what's interesting is the sites that we know of. So when the Spanish arrived, when Europeans arrived and they started studying these ancient Central American Maya sites, they were only seeing the most recent sites that are outside of the jungle. Something happened to the Maya people to cause them to move out towards the coast. That's during the collapse that we were talking about before we went live. Somewhere around 750 AD to 850 AD, there was some kind of collapse. Something happened that's never been fully proven. They speculate that maybe it was a volcano or some kind of drought or something caused them to push out from these jungles, and they go up towards the coast of the Yucatan, or these people fizzle out and die. But deeper into the jungle, the most inaccessible places are the oldest places, and according to the archaeologists and explorers who have been out there, of which I really can't find many photos of, the deeper you go into the jungle, the older the sites get and the bigger the blocks get. So you go to Chichen Itza and the blocks are this big, right? But you go to sites that are in the middle of the jungle, like a place that they just found called Okomtun, which is 37 miles deep into the Campeche jungle. Ivan Sprach just found it. He's like a Slovenian archaeologist.
Was that reported in the last month or two?
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was the city that was found recently. And so Okomtun means stone column. So they find columns there that look exactly like these columns that you see in Egypt, like these giant single monolithic columns. And so you're talking about columns that are, giant, huge blocks. And so the deeper you go into the jungle, the older the sites get and the bigger the blocks get. And we know that the Egyptians, we know that the Maya had the knowledge of how to move these before up to the collapse. So, if you're talking like 700 AD, that's not really early in the Maya world. They go back probably 2000 BC to, or I'm sorry, 200 BC when they're building giant monuments, 200 BC, maybe 300 BC. That's just what we know of. It definitely goes back further than that. But we know that they had the knowledge of moving these massive megalithic monuments just like the Olmecs did, because in the greatest king ever of the Maya world, his name was Pakal. And so in his tomb, we know that he was very in tune with the history of the Maya world and of the Maya gods, because inside of his tomb, he has the whole history of the Maya written in hieroglyphs and the gods written in hieroglyphs all around his tomb. And on his sarcophagus, he has the story of Palenque and the past Maya people. So, I mean, they were keeping up with their own history. And I think he was kind of calling, because, people do this all the time. Like in Egypt, after the time of the pyramids, they go back shortly to building mastabas, which is just like a single layer. So, a lot of times in the ancient world, people call back to their ancestors in their monuments and architecture. Well, he was doing that when he built his sarcophagus. His sarcophagus is 7 feet tall, 8 or 9 feet wide, and 10 or 12 feet long. And it's not a hollow sarcophagus. It's a solid sarcophagus with just enough room carved out in the middle beneath the lid for his body to fit. So the base is somewhere in the range of 30 to 40 tons. The lid is 15 tons. And so we know that they were able to move that, and it's all one single piece of limestone. I should say that it's one solid boulder. And so they lifted that up and they placed it in his burial chamber, just like they did in Egypt. So we know they had the knowledge to be able to move these blocks, but they didn't always do it. And the examples of when they moved these blocks are found deeper and deeper into the jungle. So there's a huge mystery there.
Is there any evidence that the Maya reused Olmec sites? Is there any layering of the two civilizations, or?
Well, yeah, I mean there's some evidence that there were Maya people who were settling in Olmec heartland, but there's not a lot of evidence.
There's not a foundation under a foundation.
No, nothing like
Yeah.
that. I would say by the time the Maya are at their height, Olmec structures and Olmec architecture just looks like hillsides. A lot of this is detected later on, I guess. When you have LiDAR, we start really seeing just how much, because when you go out to La Venta, you can see the Olmec pyramid there, but all the other little palaces and everything that they built, there's trees on it, and they look like little tiny hills. You wouldn't even see it anymore. But no, we don't find a lot of actual, because they say the Olmecs are the mother culture of Mesoamerica. Well, we don't actually have a lot of evidence for that statement, although it seems like it. We see divine kingship in the Olmec world, and then we see it in the Maya later on. So it's, you put two and two together, it's very likely that as the Olmecs collapsed, somebody traveled over here and introduced the idea of kingship to these people, but there's not like a direct connection between the Maya and the Olmecs, if that makes sense.
Hey, Randall, do you have any talk a little about Maya mythology and what they believe their origin story was? Are you comfortable with that? I mean,
I think so.
yeah, they believe that time was cyclical and history was cyclical, and
Well, and maybe
our
Luke can help me with some of the pronunciations here.
Yeah.
This is a quote from the smoking gods, because there were a lot of gods smoking in Mayan, primarily cosmological ideas.
smoking marble lights or
Smoking cigars, mostly cigars.
smoking cigars, mostly.
Yeah.
The Refugio was in Cuba, right, for the cigar manufacturing of the Maya.
Apparently so, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is talking about that there were originally 4 Tezcatlapocas, T-E-Z, Tezcatlapocas.
Are those time periods?
Yeah, that's
Vikings?
about, yeah, you're saying it about right.
Okay.
Tekelapocus.
Yeah. All offsprings of the old father god and mother goddess, and each of them, the 4 Tezcatlapocas, were assigned a color and a direction, which is very typical, we find in a lot of traditions. So the first 2 created the death gods and the water gods, and the third was the feathered serpent, and the 4th was the sun god. The 4 Tezcatlapocas initiated a series of suns or creations, each of which ended in collapse and disaster. After the end of the 4th sun, which was destroyed by floods, the sky fell to the earth, only to be raised again by the Tezcatlapocas, who used the 4 world trees to hold it up. And then, very much like the Yugas in the Vedic tradition, which almost the same commentary that has been applied to the Dresden Codex by Sylvanus Griswold Morley. Morley was, one of the Mayanists. He wrote a lot, his contributions, a lot of them were published in the Bureau of American Ethnology back in the early 20th century. He's commenting here with regard to the numbers found in the Dresden Codex, that they become greater and greater until in the so-called serpent numbers, a grand total of nearly 12.5 million days, about 34,000 years, is recorded again and again. In these well-nigh inconceivable periods, all the smaller units may be regarded as coming at last to a more or less exact close. Finally, on the last page of the manuscript is depicted the destruction of the world for which these highest numbers have paved the way. Here we see the rain serpent stretching across the sky, belching forth torrents of water. Great streams of water gush from the sun and the moon. And that's from that famous page out of the Dresden Codex.
Yep.
Randall, do you think that was just a campfire story, or do you think there was some literal truth to that, and how might you interpret it with literal truth?
Oh, absolutely. I think it was literal truth.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that there's not a theological or a cosmological overprint on memories of actual events. I think that that's a natural response to these kinds of things, especially things that might be cosmic in origin, which could include both impact type events, disintegrating comets, or possibly a solar storm, possibly even a nearby supernova that is visible in the sky that could have consequences.
Do you believe the plumed serpent represents a comet?
That would be my first opinion.
And mine as well. And
yeah,
every culture on Earth that I've found, from the Welsh flag, which has a dragon on it, to the Japanese, which are obsessed with dragons, to the Chinese, to the Maya, everybody's got the smoking, flame-headed snake coming from the sky, right?
Yep.
And including Chichen Itza, which embeds that.
Yep.
What am I trying to say? Iconography? No, I'm missing my word here.
Yeah. The pyramid
motif embeds that motif into the actual construction of Chichen Itza. And if people haven't seen that, of course, on the equinox, you can actually see the shadows. The building is designed to show the shadow of a plumed serpent coming from above on that very special day. And if cultures around the world share that, either that's an archetype that's somehow built into the structure of our brains independently, or it was shared knowledge of something that they saw in the sky that they wanted to remember.
Yeah.
I'm just learning this software. I see that there is an option for doing a share screen, I guess.
Yeah, there's an option for sharing your screen.
Can I try that? Let me see without throwing us all awry here. Let's see. Okay, screen. I'm a little bit, doing some of the other software I'm much more experienced with. Let's see.
Now, while Randall's working on that, George, here's something that's really interesting. You guys have probably seen Graham Hancock touch on this a lot, where he touches on the handbags that people are talking about, civilization bringers. What's really interesting is one of the first places that we see that is in a representation made on a basalt. It's kind of like a stela, but it's an insanely intricate depiction of Quetzalcoatl, which is we don't actually know what the Olmecs called their god, but it's an insanely intricate depiction of the plumed serpent almost holding a man who's holding a handbag. And that's one of the most ancient representations. Well, it's actually the first representation of the plumed serpent in the New World, and it's the first representation of somebody holding a handbag. And this dates back to probably 1000 BC, almost just the very beginning of civilization in Central America. And it's already fully fledged. I mean, it's as good as hieroglyphics get in Central America. So,
are we seeing my share screen?
We're seeing it.
Is it full screen?
Yes.
Oh, okay, excellent. So this is from the final page of the Dresden Codex, and you can see the sky serpent there belching out the waters of the flood. And there's some other interesting things going on here, and I have not, by any means fully interpreted this. I only have some speculations. I would certainly like to dive into it more, but it definitely seems to me to suggest that the flood was perceived as having some kind of a cosmic origin, which would make sense if the flood followed in the wake of an impact event. Here's one possibility, George.
Yeah.
If you've got a multi-impact event, we're looking at a number of possibilities here. One would be that we would have impacts right into the ocean, if there were impacts into the Western Atlantic or into the Gulf, it's very possible that you could have tremendous torrential rain out over the Central America. And it wouldn't necessarily even have to be Younger Dryas in age.
Hey, Randall, pull your mic a little closer.
But in any case, if that was the if a comet or events in the sky were being observed, fireballs, meteors, a comet itself, and then this was followed by torrential rains and flooding, you could see how they would naturally make the connection. Something, if you look close on this, George, this is the god of death right here at the bottom. I'm not sure what the god is holding in the left hand. Look in the right hand. Is that not a Vajra?
Oh yes, that's our Vajra, isn't it? Absolutely fascinating.
Doesn't that? I would say that's probably a Vajra right there.
Now,
hey, Randall,
fill me in on what a Vajra is, especially for anybody who doesn't know.
Yeah.
Okay, a Vajra was the ultimate weapon wielded by Indra, the Vedic god of thunder and the sky and a lot of things. But
Indra was in India, and that Vajra is in Mesoamerica.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the Vajra was also turned up in Greece. So we've got India, Greece, and now Mesoamerica.
And Mithras with the Romans, right?
Mithras with the Romans, absolutely, yes.
And we've got to diverge just a little bit. Why does the Vajra interest us right now, Randall?
Gee, George.
We've been consumed with Vajra operation in the 21st century?
It's appearing to be increasingly likely to be the case that we are dealing with a rediscovery of some principle anyway that's connected with the Vajra.
That's right. Our friend Malcolm Bendall has a absolutely jaw-dropping device and a retrofit of an engine, but the technology that he uses on the engine is applicable to many, many other things, and it's more a demonstration of the powers that can be achieved with rather simple configurations of, at least now, common household items, or at least Lowe's or Home Depot items. So the potential for Mr. Bendall's discoveries and his technology, and his belief is that it reached back into ancient times and that we lost it. And the mythologies around the world that contain an item of great power were indeed manifestations of this same technology in ancient times, as mind-blowing as that is. But our mind has been quite blown of recent, correct, Mr. Carlson?
I would have to agree.
Yeah.
And I think we could be a little more specific and say that the basis of this technology is plasma. It's a plasma-based technology, which is the fourth state of matter. And what's interesting about plasma, George, I would say that, first of all, that in the four states of matter, from solid, liquid to gas, you have a bond between the electrons and the neutrons, even though you have greater degrees of freedom as you move from solid through liquid to gas. Once you get to the plasma, you've got a complete disassociation between the electrons and the now newly produced ions. And what's interesting then is this sea of what would apparently be chaotic, random electrons and ions actually can self-organize.
Excellent description.
Yeah. And it can conduct electromagnetic fields. And the key to the whole thing seems to be sacred geometry.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these elements are coming together, and that's what really drove home to me in our discussion yesterday.
Are there elements of sacred geometry in the Mayan traditions?
Oh, yeah.
There are. Luke, please tell us. I didn't know that you had delved into that term in that field, sacred geometry.
Yeah, so it's they don't acknowledge it in the same way that the old world may. And it wasn't until, the late 80s, early 90s that it was actually figured out that the Maya were aware of sacred geometry or had their own sacred geometry, but it's really the same. But it's this is kind of just a frontier of Maya archaeology, or people studying the Maya world. So basically,
Really?
yeah. So it took a guy, um, golly, why can't I remember his name? Chris Powell.
Because you're on a podcast. Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
good
yeah,
job.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Chris Powell is his name. He was an engineer who came to actually he's actually a colleague of Dr. Barnhart.
Hmm.
They studied underneath a woman whose name um, her name escapes me. Why does her
Because you're on a
name?
podcast.
I've said
Yeah.
her name. I say her name every single day. Why am I? Um,
Because podcast is
Good
amnesia and
night.
dementia producing. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, man. Why
Yeah.
am I not thinking of her name?
It
Anyways,
gets us all. I hope
I'll
people
think of it. I'll think of it here
listen
in
to
just
it.
in like 2 seconds. I'll think of
That's
it.
just fine. But yeah, what's she saying?
So, anyways, dude, this is bothering me. Hold on, I have a
It's
hold on.
awful, isn't it?
I have a book right here.
You know, it even happens to Sam Harris, as well spoken as he is. He's one of my favorite
Yeah,
podcasters. He will sometimes,
dude,
yeah.
dude,
What's her name?
Linda Sheely, that's her name.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, Linda
Oh,
I have her.
Steele.
I have her book, A Forest of
yeah,
Kings. Um,
yep.
so, anyways, Linda Sheely, fantastic lady. Um, anyways, so she always presented her class as being the frontier of Maya archaeology. They were the only, they were the only school. I believe it was here in Austin, Texas, which I'm in San Antonio, but just right down the road. She would entertain ideas, fringe archaeological ideas that other schools and other departments wouldn't, right? So
Good for her.
so she takes on Christopher Powell. Christopher Powell is an engineer, and he comes in and he starts reading the Popol Vuh, and the Popol Vuh, which is it's one of the only surviving Maya codices left. I should also say what we were talking about earlier about the Maya, the knowledge that they may have had of their ancient past, of cataclysms that have happened in the past. Man, as much as people talk about how devastating the burning of the Library of Alexandria may have been.
Mm,
When Rome attacks Alexandria and the boat docks catch on fire, and that fire spreads up to the library, and it burned part of the library down, and
mm,
who knows how much we lost. Okay,
mm,
when the Spanish came in, a guy named Diego de Landa he sent out all of his conquistadors all across the Yucatan Peninsula. They enslaved the Maya people. They go and get all of their writings. The Maya people have been writing for over 1,000 years at this point. And I should also say that when the Spanish meet the Aztecs, who are closer who are over in Mexico Valley, Mexico, around Mexico City, literally Mexico City, we know that the Aztecs, who are nothing. They're a speck compared to the Maya. The Maya achieved so much more than the Aztecs ever did. The Aztecs were manufacturing 485,000 pieces of paper a year, okay? And the Aztecs had only been around for about 150 to 200, maybe 300 years at the most. The Maya have a more than 2,000 year long history.
mm.
And the Maya were producing and writing during that entire time. And so they were producing thousands and thousands and thousands of books. Okay, Diego de Landa, he goes and gathers all of these, and he throws them all in pyres, which is the word
Mm.
they use. So that's mounds of books. So all the books I have back here, all the knowledge that are in these books, this wouldn't even be 1/20th of one pyre.
Mhm.
Okay. So he took the entire history, 2,000 years of writing, threw it in multiple pyres from floor to ceiling, giant mounds of books, and burned all of it to ash. Only 4 remain. And Randall knows this if he's looked into the Dresden Codex. The amount of information that is encoded into the Dresden Codex is overwhelming. I'm talking about. I have a book here. Okay, so this book, A New World Foundations of New World Cultural Astronomy. This is just the Maya. Okay, you're talking about an entire book of information. This doesn't even cover everything. This is the foundations of astronomy. All of this is based on the Dresden Codex, and the Dresden Codex is like this thick, right? But it's written front and back on each piece of paper. A codex is not exactly a book. So the Dresden Codex, the Popol Vuh, and there's a couple others, and there may be a fifth one that the Lacandon Maya people are holding on to, that are hiding from INA, which is the Archaeology Institute in Mexico, in the Lacandon jungle. We know there may be 1 or 2 books that are out there. So, anyways, They burned all of that. So what's the likelihood that the Maya people literally wrote something down about cataclysms happening in the Yucatan? Very likely.
Yeah.
But it was burned. And so now we kind of piece everything together. And so one of the important things about these codices, especially the Dresden Codex, so without that, you walk into something called the Temple of the Sun, which is at Palenque. And I was there in January. So you walk in and it's organized in a strange way. There's like, there's 4 pillars at the front, 4 pillars at the back. The walls aren't at the front aren't exactly even. They don't I guess come out to the same degree. And you look around and you're like, man, this is a really odd place to be. And I bet in the 1700s, when people were first exploring there, Spanish explorers were first exploring Palenque, all the way until the Maya code was cracked in the late 1900s, just 40 some odd years ago. There was no idea. It just looked like, well, they weren't really I guess we know that they were good stonemasons, but they didn't do a good job of making this building perfectly symmetrical. Well, when the Dresden Codex is cracked, it adds the context to the building, and the building is a calendar for every time that the sun rises throughout the year, the shadows move inside of the temple, and wherever the shadows fall, and where the hieroglyphs are inside of the temple, the priest that's going up there can determine what time of year it is and what seasons are coming in the future. But the thing is, every single temple in the entire Maya world is exactly like that. All of them a little bit different to follow something else. Some follow the sun, some follow the moon, some follow Venus. They're all different, and it's all a case by case basis. So it's
they were just trying to keep track of when they should plant corn, right? Yeah.
Well,
facetiously, because it's always attributed, well, they need to know the planting seasons. And it just seems to be quite a bit of trouble and complex mathematics to know that, hey, it's warming up, let's throw some seeds out.
Well, and we know at Copan they had oh man, I don't know the exact kind of terminology for this. I bet maybe you or Randall do. But there are places in Africa where they will put it's almost like an obelisk, kind of. It's like a small obelisk, and they put stones around it on the ground, and wherever the shadows land determines the time of year. At Copan, they had that. So they already knew that.
That's not hard to do. Any of us could do that.
Yeah.
All it takes is a stick in the ground. Oh, it's just my pointer, but I use it for lectures, right? It's just it's a pointer, but it's the stick in the ground, the gnomon pole that's inserted into the ground. A circle is drawn around it, and then from that you can determine the time of day, the time of year, and the latitude. And that variation would also depend a little bit on the latitude,
right,
as to where the rising and setting points of the various auspicious bodies are against the horizon. So I'm very interested in the extent to which they would have tracked lunar motion, because there's certainly the Chacoan culture in the Southwest and the Hopewellian culture and the Fort Ancient culture in the eastern woodlands of of America were all tracking the 18.6 year lunar cycle,
right,
from maximum to minimum. And I don't know, I'm not familiar to what extent the Mayans may have done that, but I would be surprised if they weren't tracking that cycle.
Yeah, I think, according in my conversations with Dr. Barnhart, of course, it's tough when you're just, taking on the whole Maya world. I mean, golly, I'm learning that it's so much more in depth than even Egypt as far as to understand everything that's going on. Oh, dude, it's not even close. It's actually, it's not even close. I can say that pretty evenly. Or pretty confidently. There's just so much going on. It's so hard to digest. So yeah, they were tracking everything. I want to say they were one of only 2 ancient cultures that we know of that were tracking Venus, I believe. I think the Sumerians were tracking Venus and the Maya were tracking Venus. And the Maya were one of the only ancient cultures that was able to track, I guess, our years perfectly. They knew that we had 365 day a year, and so they added an extra month on for that. But I know that Greece was aware of that too, and that Greece and Rome, they didn't like that it was a 365 day year. I'm not an expert on that specifically, but I know that man, they were experts in astronomy.
It was 300 until we got our noggin knocked. All right.
360.
Yeah. I think.
Or, excuse me, 360. Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So Rome and Greece, they preferred the 360-day calendar, right? Is that I think?
Well, yeah. There was oftentimes there were concurrent calendars. The actual calendar, the solar calendar, and then the sacred calendar, which was the 360 days. I mean, I know the Babylonians and probably even earlier the Sumerians. The Sumerians, I think, had a 360-day calendar that they held up to be the ideal ratio of diurnal rotations of the Earth to one orbit of the Earth around the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And that probably somewhere along the way, a catastrophe of some kind caused that discrepancy.
Mm. Yeah.
Hey, fellas, we got a question from the audience here, and I just want to run it by because I share this curiosity. Could the similarities, if any, between Olmec Egyptian and English units of measure be purely coincidental? Do you find, I know...
Say that again? Is this
the
on the...
units of measure?
Yeah.
The similarity across those cultures. And I'm assuming that's measurement of time or measurement of length, because we do see that.
Oh, it could be time, length, volume, area, all of those. Yes, there's definitely
Okay, well, I can see why you might somehow, at least a year is a year for everybody, but there's no reason a foot is a foot for everybody, right? Does anybody know, what did they work in, Luke? Did they have a standard? Did they have a cubit, a Mayan cubit?
Well, that's kind of one of the things that we don't really know. We know that they were building. I mean, you gotta realize, like, their culture, 99.9% of their written history gone. Gone. We'll never know. And so a lot of it is being pieced back together slowly over time, especially sacred geometry. That's only a couple decades old, and almost nobody is studying it. But we do know that they were building a lot of their temples to the same dimensions, to the same lengths. But however they broke that up, we don't exactly know. So, yeah. But I think that the foot and the mile has some kind of grounded importance to it, right? I mean, there's a reason that the mile and the foot exists, right? Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, the mile was 1,000 paces. So,
yeah.
For example, you have the imperial mile, which our modern American mile is based upon, 5,280 feet. Well, there was a Roman mile, and it was shorter. It was less than 5,000 feet. So, but that was undoubtedly a connection because the ancient British were of taller stature than the ancient Romans. But it would be a natural thing for people to want to, for example, define an area of land or a distance. So what would be the most natural way to do that would be through pacing. Right. You would start pacing, and you would count, for example, every time your right foot hit the ground. So in Roman, in Latin, the word for 1,000 is mil. That's where we get the word mile. So a mile was 1,000 paces. Our imperial mile, to me, had to have had its roots in ancient Britain, and is probably thousands of years old. The foot, of course, what was it? The standard story is it was what King Edward, I think, they standardized his foot. But it would be natural for any culture to define a number of basic units of measurement based upon human anatomy. So the cubit was elbow to fingertip. That's an obvious way that you might be measuring a rope or a piece of cloth. Then there was the royal cubit, which was the cubit elbow to fingertips with a hand's breadth. So your long finger would line up with your knuckles, and that was your. So, and then of course the inch was the digit, right? And if you put your thumb down on a piece of paper and strike off on either side of it, it's going to be damn close to our modern inch.
Yep.
Right. So these units of measurement were based ultimately on human anatomy.
Yeah.
However, I think what they did understand was that, in the words of Protagoras, that man is the measure of all things. And so
Mm.
I think that they understood that there was a cosmological link, naturally, an outgrowth of using human anatomy as your ultimate yardstick. And so I'll give you an example to me, which is very interesting. We measure our miles, 5,280 feet. Well, if you divide that by 1,000, now you've got the length of the pace, 5.28 feet. So what you're actually talking about there is a ratio between a pace, like 1, 2. Every time your right foot goes down, 1, 2.
Mm.
There's your pace. But we're talking about feet, right? Which is the appendage at the bottom of your leg, right? So your feet are what anchors you to the earth. Your pace is what moves you across the face of the earth. So you take that ratio of pace to foot, and in our imperial system, that's 5.28 feet. Now, I'll give you an example of how this ratio is actually embedded in the symbology of sacred geometry and architecture. If you take Stonehenge and you were to draw a circle around the outer sarsen stone uprights, the sandstone uprights with their big lintels on, which almost certainly numbered 30, if you were to draw a circle around that, it would be very, very close to 105.6 feet in diameter, right? Now, that measurement is duplicated in the average distance or average length of the lintels on the sarsen stones, which is 10.56 feet. So if you take 10.56 feet, multiply that by 10, you have 105.6 feet. So it seems then that they were using, that there was a common system of measurement there that gave not only the length of the lintels, but the diameter of the outer ringed upright stone circle. Well, it turns out that 105.6 feet is what exactly one, what is it, George? You got your calculator there. 105.6 feet times 10.
Yep, I got it. I'll play Kyle for you. I'll be Kyle.
So times
105.6
times 5.
105.6 times 5, sir, is 528. Which, hold on, I think I've had an incredible insight. The angle of the pyramid. If you find the angle of the wall, the sides of the pyramid, it's 52.8, correct?
I think so.
51.84.
Okay.
Is it 51.8? I was trying to make a joke, but
So
I thought you were trying to relate it to that.
Well, what I'm trying to show you here is that it looks like if you take the outer circle defining Stonehenge times 50, you have a mile.
Yeah.
You have a mile. Exactly our imperial mile, which presumably originated in Britain. So now you see there's a link there between, assuming that's a mile, that somebody standardized it, perhaps back in the time of the building of Stonehenge, with a standardized pace and a standardized foot, and it gave us a unit that's a sub-multiple of the mile. But I'll show you another interesting correlation to show you how there's this kind
Bring that mic a little closer to you, Randall. It's creeping away.
That there's kind of this ubiquitous utilization of these ratios and proportions. We find in the book of Revelations, one of the most famous passages in the book of Revelations is when John has this prophetic vision of the holy city descending out of heaven, right?
Yeah.
So and then John in his vision describes the celestial city descending out of the heavens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's 12,000 furlongs. The length, the height, and the breadth of it are equal 12,000 furlongs. And the city lieth foursquare, the length, the height, and the breadth of it are equal, 12,000 furlongs. Well, if you take a furlong, what is the modern furlong? It's 660 feet. 660 feet is a furlong, and it's still used in horse racing tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Right? A furlong is 660 feet. So now, if you take the oblate spheroid of the Earth, and you're trying to look for an ideal sphere that has the same volume as the oblate spheroid of the Earth, it would be 7,920 miles in diameter, that sphere. Okay, whereas the actual Earth is 7,926 miles equatorial diameter, 7,900 miles polar diameter, right? Which makes the mean 7,913, but the mean does not have the same volume as the actual Earth. The actual Earth volume would be 7,920 miles. Now, why do I say that? Okay, because remember, again, we're measuring in miles, which is a human a unit of measurement derived from the human scale, okay? Now, when you look at the furlong, George, pull up your calculator. You got it right there,
Yes.
right? Okay, so put in 660 feet for the length of a furlong. Now, convert that to inches by multiplying times 12.
Yes, sir. That would be 7,920.
Yes. So we have now a proportion. Furlong to an inch is the same as an idealized Earth sphere to a mile.
Holy shit.
And that's exact. Now let's go further with it to see how this cosmological
Hold on, let's do
system.
it again. So there's 7,920 inches in a furlong.
Yes.
And the perfect sphere of the Earth would be 7,920 feet on average.
Miles in diameter.
Miles in diameter.
Miles. So you're looking at a ratio.
Yeah, miles.
The Earth to a mile is precisely the same as a furlong to an inch.
Which is 7,920.
Yes.
Just another coincidence, Dr. Carl.
Now, I'll do one more before I turn it back over to Luke. If we go back to the book of Revelation, so the vision of the holy city, it's 12,000 furlongs. 12,000 furlongs. Okay, so put 12,000 into your calculator, George.
Indeed. Okay.
And then now divide that by the number of feet in a mile, 5,280.
That's 2.27272727.
Hit the reciprocal key.
And do it again. Hold it. Give me the numbers again. Did I mess it up? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you were 12,000 furlongs.
Yeah, 12,000. Yes.
12,000. Okay, 12,000 furlongs.
Yeah.
Now multiply that times 660 to convert that to feet. That's the step we left out.
So that would be 7,920,000 feet.
I believe you're right there.
Okay.
Now, 7,920,000 feet. Okay, so now
a lot of feet.
Divide that by 5,280.
Divided by 5,280. Boom.
Which is going to be a little easier to visualize.
It's an even 1,500. 1,500.
1,500 miles is 12,000 furlongs. That's what you just calculated. We took that biblical verse out of this prophetic vision of John out of the book, the culminating verses of the Bible. He has this vision of this holy city descending from God, and we find out when we do this little conversion that it's 1,500 miles in diameter, right? Okay, so now I want you to do this. To look at this ratio, we want to look at one more ratio. Put in the idealized Earth diameter, 7,920, and divide that by the diameter of the holy city, 1,500.
5.28.
The ratio of the pace to the foot is the ratio of the Earth to the holy city.
Well, that would indicate there's a creator.
How? Well, I'm not ready to go there yet, but see, it goes on. I mean, this is the thing. Seems to be a matrix that is linking all these ancient cultures, all these ancient visions, the prophecies, the technology. Throughout the ages, it was like there has been these groups of people that had access to some kind of cosmological information that has been lost and forgotten. And it shows up all over the damn place.
Yeah. Luke, what's going through your head, man?
Well, I have been quietly working on some biblical videos.
Mm.
Where I'm really into so I'm I guess most closely like Orthodox Greek Christian. Um,
Mm.
I like the if I'm gonna be a Christian, I like it to have some kind of order and to be connected to more closely to what Paul's letters said that the church should be like. I really like that they have a foundation in the ancient religion of Christianity. Like I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, you gotta understand, this isn't a this isn't a North American United States white religion. This is a Middle Eastern Aramaic Arabic religion. You
Mhm.
know, and well,
Mhm.
it's a Greek religion too, but you know what I mean. It was in Africa before it was in Greece, and so. But anyways, I've been studying Jacob in or I'm sorry, not Jacob, Joseph in Egypt, and
Yeah.
studying the Exodus. And man, I've always had like a childlike faith in the Bible, but you start studying what whoever wrote the Bible, the stories in Egypt, they knew exactly what they were talking about. It's 100% accurate. Everything. The only thing that's wrong is that when they say how many uh, Semitic people would have been in Egypt, they say 600,000. That's definitely wrong. But what's interesting is every single other little, I mean, you're talking about the tiniest of details about whether they use straw in their mud bricks to make their buildings. Whoever was writing these stories in the Bible knew exactly what to say. And
Mm.
if they weren't in Egypt when they were writing it, then it's surprising because they know exactly what the stools look like that women give birth on. Um, they knew every single little nuanced detail about Egypt at the time, exactly at the time that they're writing it, and exactly the events that are happening, and exactly how people mourn at that exact time within these dynasties. So I mean, if you're talking about Moses, you're looking at around the time of Ramses the second, and man, it's amazing how much the Bible really stands up. Like the Bible stacks up a lot of time to scrutiny. You try to prove the Bible wrong. I mean, there are things that I will read about the Bible where I'll go, well, that's just not right. There just weren't 600,000 Israelite people that were enslaved in Egypt that escaped Egypt. 6,000 maybe, 600 probably. But a lot of things really stack up about the Bible. That's kind of what was going through my head is people have been diving into that book for so long, and there's so much in there that it's hard for me to even deny. I mean, I'm a believer, but like it logically and objectively, it's hard to look at all these things and think that, or so human beings are the highest form of intelligence ever. You know, am I going to believe that? I don't believe that. But
Mhm.
it's just amazing, having these conversations and I'm learning. I didn't know anything about what Randall was just talking about, but you hear that and it's just undeniable in my eyes that there's some kind of higher intelligence. And when I think of God, I don't really think of him as some guy sitting on a cloud that looks like Randall. I think of
Hey, now I've been carefully cultivating this look for decades.
you know, uh, that's not really what I think of. I don't think it's so simple. I think I don't know, it's some kind of mind that's behind all of existence. My personal opinion. So
I hope he
I,
looks like Randall or you for different reasons each, but
I, I'd take looking like
you think
Randall.
Randall is just more
Yeah, yeah,
godlike. You
yeah,
could
yeah.
be a demigod, right? You could be one of God's
I
helpers.
I would probably be, yeah, one of the gods that are like struck down. You know what I mean? I think that's probably where I'm at.
One of the gods hurled down
I
from
tell you,
heaven.
Yeah,
too,
yeah,
I've
yeah.
just got to make the observation that one of the things I learned from another one of our speakers at the Cosmic Summit, Dr. Collins, when I went on the 2 digs in Egypt with him, and that was actually at the last campsite of the Israelites, but we were studying it for Sodom, so it had a 2-stage life there. But one of the things that Collins impressed on us was how much geography there is in the Bible.
Oh yeah.
That they went from here, they went to there, they went this many days to there. And that why would you include in the campfire story detailed geography?
Mm.
No one cares, first of all, and you glaze through it when you're reading the Bible anyway. You're like, what is all of this? Here's to theirs and over theirs, and and he just that that geographical literacy that matches what we still know these place names and relative locations, are maintained today, makes you think that they were writing literally, that it was not a campfire story.
Mhm.
And so I'm glad you're moving towards the same things. I tell you, I've got a pretty good question here from the audience. We got several of them,
Okay.
but let me share this one because it's got a little bit of a punchline that Randall might be interested in. Are there Olmec or Sumerian or pre-dynastic Egyptian remains that make reference to each other's civilization or vice versa? Is there any indication in any of these ancient cultures, well, let's make this the question, that the moon is artificial or a time before the moon was in the sky? Do you have any insight there, Randall? I know you love the moon.
Well, I do, but I'm not going to say that it's, artificial. I'm not sure how we would even define that term.
That's good point.
No,
That's
I
what
wouldn't say that it's artificial. I would say that it's natural. However, let me qualify that by saying that the moon is a very unusual object. It's not really obeying the laws of physics. It's
yeah.
primary. Yeah, in some ways, it's almost like the moon is an inside-out planet. It's a very strange thing that just is very difficult to explain within the known laws of physics. I'll just say I don't go from that to.
Well, I got to add mild insight I've been thinking about for 30 years, but now that we've gotten into sacred geometry and talking to Bendall and whatnot, it was just a precursor to an immense amount of knowledge. But the fact that the moon perfectly occludes the sun during an eclipse, there are another 209 moons in the solar system, right? Not one of them comes anywhere close to perfectly occluding the sun, right? That's a hell of a coincidence that it's 400 times closer to us than the sun and 400 times the, diameter of the sun, right? So that happens to put it absolutely perfectly right there, and no other moon does that. I'm just saying this kind of an interesting trait to our planet and its companion.
Yeah.
Yes, it is, and there are all kinds of very interesting tales about the moon from all.
How
cultures.
far does the moon travel in an hour, Randall?
Well, I believe I did that calculation after a suggestion by Malcolm. I think it.
Well, it travels its radius, right?
Its diameter, I believe.
Excuse me, its diameter. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we could quickly figure that out. Let's see here.
See, there's no Newtonian law that says a body in orbit around another body with a third body shall be the same, the proper distance to perfectly occlude the body, nor does it say what Randall's going to hit here in a moment, a body in orbit around another body shall itself travel its own diameter in an hour. I mean, there's no traditional physics or cosmological reason that happens.
Okay, let's see here.
Sorry, Luke, we're getting off on sacred geometry, but I tell you, spend some time with Bendall.
I'm along for the ride, man.
742,986.6 miles in the average circumference of the moon's orbit. Okay, now what did you just say? It travels.
The distance it travels in either 24 hours or an hour is related to its diameter, right?
So then we would need to divide that by 365.24 to get how far it travels in a day. And then we would have to divide that by 24 to see how far it travels in an hour. And I'm coming up with 84. Is that 84,000? I got to get my reading glass.
We need to get Randall out there.
The moon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get Elon to come to the Cosmic Summit, and we'll send Randall out there and film an episode of the podcast.
We've got it here. We've got it. It's an hour.
It's an hour.
It's only, and of course my number is a little off here. It's a little shy, but I've been doing some rounding. So, yeah, it travels its own diameter in an hour. That times 24.
That's an astonishing coincidence.
times 365.24. Yeah, and so it travels very, very close to its own diameter and whatnot.
Good Lord. Well, the moon is starting to rise here in Raleigh. Yeah, so we've gone on about 2 hours, fellas. Maybe time to wrap it up, but the one good thing about this podcast is it ain't ever over, man. This is all about an event that we've got coming up
Yep.
in 10 months. Tickets are for sale. We've got 100 limited tickets that if you buy now, you're going to get a VIP ticket and VIP treatment for the first 100 people, but paying regular gate prices. So encourage everybody to go to cosmicsummit.com, buy themselves a ticket, buy some friends a ticket, join the Cosmic Circle, and see us next time here in the rabbit hole. But what else? What are y'all's closing thoughts, gentlemen?
I would like to just take an opportunity as well to remind people that we have this Mysteries of the Cumberland Plateau coming up
Yes.
first week in November, and we've got some spaces left, and we're exploring some very interesting environments
I
geologically.
may join you on that, Randall.
You may what?
I may join you on that. If
I wish you would.
I haven't made a tour yet. We've traveled
we-
together, but not on one of your standard tours.
Well, what's special about this is it's such an amazing landscape that's hidden right in our backyards, basically,
Yeah.
for those of us that live in the Southeast. And
Yeah, got to
Yeah.
see it, man.
There-
Truly in
there
our
are-
backyards.
there's some
And,
imprints in that landscape that are
Yeah.
definitely, in my mind,
The Carolina Bays are in our front yard, and various evidence of catastrophes in our backyard. Luke, what do you have coming up? You've got a tour coming up, don't you?
Yep, I've got a tour coming up in March. If you guys are familiar with NEXT, he and I are grouping up together, and we're going to we're leading together the Lost Cities of the Maya tour in the Yucatan. So we're going to Chichen Itza, Uxmal, Ekbalam, Labna, Skitchmook. We're going to a set of unnamed, uncharted ruins in the middle of the jungle. Got a couple other surprises going. Loltun Cave, if I said that, we're gonna go out there. But in December, I'm headed to Guatemala. February, I'm headed to Veracruz to see the Olmec heads. I'm spending a week in the Yucatan, going to Calakmul and a few other places the week before my tour, and then after that, in April, I'm going out to the city of Yaxchilan, which is what I talked about in. I talked about this at Cosmic Summit. I know that there are ruins there. That if the Mexican government, if they build the dam in the Usamasenta River, it's going to sink that little Bode Island, and it's going to basically drown this entire Maya city, of which only 10% of it has been charted or even photographed. So I'm going to do that, and then somewhere in there, I'm going to find a week to escape to go to Belize to check out that giant sinkhole, which is not. There's blue holes in the ocean, in the jungle. They're called the black hole, and only a few people have been out there. And I got with Randall about that the other day, and I was telling him because I saw people had been telling me they were like Randall mentioned you in the Cosmic Summit, and I was like, was I in the bathroom during this? I missed this. And so I went back and watched it, and there was a clip that the Cosmic Summit posted on their social media, and I saw that just briefly Randall talked about when I mentioned the cenotes and the sinkholes, and called Randall and I said, when I go there, let me know of any, I don't know, formations that you may have in your mind. I mean, I have literally no idea, but I was telling him, just let me know. I'm going to get photos and videos of everything. And if there's anything in particular you'd like me to photograph or video or take a photo of and send back to you, I'd love to do that. So there may be we may work together on something small in the future.
That's awesome. Y'all are both going on the road and taking people out and physically showing them this stuff. It's just terrific. I had one more thing to add, and excuse me, it's escaping me now. Oh, that both of you to plug a small and struggling podcast, formerly known as Concrete, now Danny Jones. I'm sure he needs my plug.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We didn't even talk about that.
But both of you fellows appeared separately on the Concrete podcast, which is a big show.
Yeah.
And I've been getting way into it. These last two episodes with Jack Sarfati
Sarfati, yeah.
Sarfati are pretty amazing in several ways. But your 2 episodes have not dropped yet, but we should see them any day, correct?
Yeah. Do you have any
Yeah,
idea when yours comes out, Randall? Or you're in two, right?
Yeah, I was in too because I co-guested with Ben Van Kerkwick of
that's
Mhm.
right.
Uncharted X. So we did one together. Then he did one solo with Danny, and then I did one solo with Danny. And
Oh,
we spent several hours essentially breaking down on my level of understanding plasma technology.
wow.
Interesting. And then Luke, you appeared after that, so we should see Randall's podcast if he does it chronologically pop up first, and then you'll have one where it's just you on there with Danny for didn't you say for almost 4 hours or something?
Yeah, it went on for a long time.
Yeah.
We had to cut it. So he says that when he goes to 4 hours, it gets broken into 2 episodes. So ours is
Mm-hmm.
like 3 hours and 56 minutes or something like that. So we kept it
Mm-hmm.
right at just one episode. And I mean, a lot of his episodes are only 2.5 hours. So we went way over.
Well, you had to talk about the Cosmic Summit for an hour, of course.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. We talked about it at the beginning. If that actually makes it into the cut, that's gonna be a spicy intro because he gets straight to it. But
I'm just
yeah,
glad he knows about it. That's terrific. I'd like to extend an invitation to him to come.
yeah. I
And
mean,
Well, he told me he wanted to come, and he also told
oh
me
well, we're going to follow up with that,
he wanted
guys.
to
Thank
do
you
a
so
tour
much for
because
bringing it up with him.
yeah,
That's terrific.
it's almost a bit of a religious calling for me to get people out and teach them to read this script that's engraved large into our planet.
mhm,
Hell yes.
Yeah.
Hell yes, man. Well,
yeah,
Godspeed with your work, gentlemen, and thank you for joining me in the rabbit
yeah.
hole today.
Well,
Oh,
real-
I did one last thing. One last thing.
we
I
both have
did
one last thing.
4 days ago. The Danica Patrick interview that I did was dropped.
Okay.
Danica
Fantastic.
Patrick,
We'll
if you
look
know
for
who
that.
she is, right?
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
up there. I saw it. It's on YouTube. It's getting a lot of views, and it's getting a pretty positive response from what I've seen so far.
That's
Cool.
great, man. That's
Cool.
terrific. And Luke, you had another thought.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you guys for having me on. Like, I mean, Randall, golly, man. When I was in high school, I was watching your interviews on Joe Rogan, and
Ah,
Isn't that cool?
I'm 26 now. Not to make you feel old, but I mean, like I've been watching you forever, and to be on this podcast, chatting it up with you is very surreal and super weird. And sitting there at that table on the Concrete podcast was surreal, and meeting everybody at Cosmic Summit. And I mean, George, golly, man, you took a risk on me, and I'm glad that my presentation went as well as people said. And I mean, man, it's just amazing that now I get to be a part of the community that kind of brought me into the interest that I have today.
Well, I tell you, you might have felt a little bit like a latecomer, but just think how early we are in this. So you're
Oh yeah,
original cast, man, and you
yeah,
still feel like we're kind of the last guy on the train. But the train's going to keep on rolling. We're going to keep educating people about these esoteric ideas,
yeah,
and eventually, we're going to win this fight to
yeah.
understand the past appropriately.
And I'm encouraging
Thank.
Randall to actually put a book out. You gotta get your
Oh
book
yeah,
published.
yeah. That and
it's
So,
coming.
contact John Reeves, Randall.
It's coming, Luke. It is. It is. I just got to quit doing all these tours and these podcasts and all these other things that keep distracting me.
yeah,
Plus my day job, which I'm still doing, but I've been able to kind of scale that back.
yeah,
Anyways, yeah, I'm taking that to heart. I know it. It's something that my wife tells me over and over again to finish the damn book.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
yeah, let's do this again.
hey,
Um,
we will, guys. Thank you again. This is a very y'all are regularly going on podcasts that have thousands of more people watching. So I'm quite honored to have you on here.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
yeah, you've done a lot for
all right.
me, George. So, it
Okay.
means a lot.
All
Thanks
right,
a lot,
guys.
fellas. We'll see y'all soon, and thanks a lot for the audience for joining us. We'll
Yes,
see you
thank you
again
guys.
in the rabbit hole in the near future. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Good
night.
night, Luke.